Okay, now for something very different. You guys know the Osmose. You guys know the Egan matrix. So what I'm gonna do is start from things that you probably definitely know, and then go as deep as possible quickly, and also when the food gets here, just grab food and eat. Like, nothing I say is all that precious or special. You guys can eat while we do this. And also feel free to like interject and interrupt and stuff.
Can you project a little more?
Okay.
I'm old.
I was saying feel free to, well, and you, perfect timing as usual, Rob. Feel free to interrupt me. Look, this is not a TED Talk. I used to play in church. I want to hear you guys, you know what I'm saying? You like it, you hate it, you have questions, like, let's make it a party, you know? All right, so I'm gonna go with the obvious and then go deeper and deeper, and I wanna show you that this is not really a keyboard. It's a brand new thing that is unbelievably special and does things that no other instrument I've ever touched can do. It deserves its rightful place in this incredible family of instruments, birthed by the brilliant people in this room. Okay, so this is Osmose. They call it a gestural synthesizer. Using gestures on an instrument is nothing new to anyone in this room. The first thing worth noting is the sensitivity, which is higher than that of a Continuum or a Continuum Mini. Here, actually, I don't know if you guys could see that. I'll go to the sensitivity menu. All right, so first of all, it comes at regular, which is like pretty normal, and for most playing styles, this is great. I crank it to extreme, and then past that, we're note on a 0 to like psychotic sensitivity. So you see the dot? I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's this dot right here. That's where the sound starts. I breathe. I mean, it's unbelievably sensitive. It requires a completely new technique to play. And the sensitivity of that first half of key travel is, just like these other instruments, completely independent per finger, per key. Now, when you reach this second half of key travel, so you push the key down, and then you get to this little cushion. And once you hit that cushion, it engages aftertouch, which does something different on each preset. In this case, it's kind of opening up a filter. Independent per key, so you can get really creative. And again, it's gestural, so if I play it, and this again is nothing new to anyone in this room, but if I play it this way, I get that attack. And you're not limited to one or the other, so I can do one articulation with this hand, or you can multiple. It's really just how creative you want to get with it. You know, how many articulations, how many gestures can you combine with all of your fingers? And going back to my last talk, like the idea of creating dynamics and scale within the same sound, and I'll get into that later, but when you start to combine these things, you can get such a wide soundscape out of just one preset. So within each preset, there are macros. Again, nothing new to you guys. And also nothing new to you guys, every single thing that you can control on this instrument receives a MIDI CC. So right now I have all the macros mapped to this. I have the effects section, the recirculator, mapped to these. And then I'll get to this. You guys most of already know what it is, but I have the sustain and two sostenutos also mapped to this controller. Very helpful, you know, for my work, especially in TV and film, like. you can really play this like an instrument. And of course, you can dive through the menu and do it just the same. All right, so, yes?
So what is that unit right above you said it, but
Oh, this is just a simple MIDI controller that I have controlling the internal parameters of the Egan matrix. The next thing I'm going to show you is actually completely unique to this entire family of instruments. Some of you might know what it is. I'm going to add a little sauce, a little reverb. It's an MPE arpeggiator. This was actually a blessing that came out of the pandemic because Expressive E had a little more time to kill when production got shut down and the unit was already ready. So they came up with this beauty. Essentially, a normal arpeggiator, right? You play 4 notes, set it and forget it, right? You hit the notes, that's it. If you're lucky and it's a really nice arpeggiator, it'll recognize the initial attack and what those dynamics were, and you might have like a slightly different dynamic on them. This is continuously tracking pressure and aftertouch on all the notes. And also, duh, I didn't mention the obvious, the notes are bendy. And I'll get to the settings of that later, but essentially you can vibrato and pitch bend on each key individually as well. So just to show you a little about what this can do with a what you were hearing just there is a really cool artifact. So I have the sensitivity turned up enough that I can trigger invisible notes and change the rhythm. It's a bizarre sensation because it's like playing the synthiest synth music, but it feels like playing classical music because you just have this like really So within the MPE arpeggiator, there are various presets, and then if you want to dive in, essentially there's this playing section here, and that's where the arpeggiator is. If you want to dive in, you can go through the presets, or you can program all the different things that the gestures and the routing of modulation, all the things that are going to happen with the arpeggiator. I'll show you a few other quick ones. This one's called chords. Can you guys hear it on that speaker? Is it even coming out of that speaker? It sounded particularly mono to me. Is it on? I was like, why are my sounds so thin today? This is aftertouch octave mode, so when I engage the aftertouch, it jumps an octave. There's several other presets. This one's cute. It's called Swingy, self-explanatory. This one's particularly fun. It's called Strum like harp strum. By the way, when I connect this to the CVC to control synths, all this information is coming out. So I can have the same pressure sensitivity, the same like incredible flexibility and like that weird classical like control of dynamics and pitch, and have it going through whatever I have connected to the CVC. It's really, really cool when that happens, especially if you connect it to all different synthesizers. And so it's jumping, you know, like every time it opens up a new voice. The trick is you can't have the preset set to polyphony set to old. It has to be set, so it has to be set to old, not lowest note. If you set it to lowest, it's just going to spit out the one channel. If you set it to old, it actually is really cool because when you do it, it jumps around like a light show because it just randomly jumps between all 8 voices. All right. So that is a feature that's unique even inside of this instrument family. Next, I'm going to show you a feature that's not unique. It's in the continuum, but it is unique in the world outside of these 3 instruments. And it's, I think they have a different name. We call it pressure-weighted portamento on the continuum, right? And then it's press glide in here. Now, you've been hearing it this whole time, but in a subtle and musical way. So pressure glide or pressure-weighted portamento is really just the idea that you set a minimum interval. In this case, I have it set to 2 semitones. And the relative pressure between any interval that size or lower is going to make a relative glide based on relative pressure between the 2 notes. It's cool if you just describe it like that, but what's really amazing about it is the instrument doesn't care how many you do. As long as you go greater than the interval, it's going to give you clean, but I can glide as many notes as I can hold bigger than that interval. I can glide. Let's see if I can make this work. So that's just kind of the clinical way of explaining it. In practice, it's like the dream of every keyboardist ever who doesn't play guitar. Like, like I can make it. It also does this interesting thing if you're slick with it. You can kind of like get rid of the articulation or but the thing you have to remember now, if I have it set to 2 semitones, I can't, that's not a chord. That's not going to happen, you know what I mean? So weird stuff if you try to play what you normally, it's just going to be like, oh, why is that chord out of tune? Because you're engaging the glide. So I'm going to show you, it's not a less musical, but let's call it a more extreme use case of pressure glide, where you start to do wider things. And I'm also going to show you a feature that I watched Ed do. Actually, you know what it was? It was the ContinuuCon during COVID. And you said this thing that just stuck in my brain, which was if you crank the pregain high enough, it acts as a wave-folding distortion that just excites everything inside of the Egan matrix. It's amazing distortion. Just so, they did not know this at Expressive E until I started doing it at NAMM. Now it's in the manual. It used to be my secret. But so, I'm going to take this tab X sound, which is really... That's the least intimidating sound in the world, right? It's just very reedy and peaceful and beautiful. I'm going to crank the pregain, turn the post down a little bit to not kill us. Same sound. And the way wavefolding distortion works is the more complex it becomes, the crazier it gets. So if I play like, so it's also another type of manipulation you can get into the sound engine with quick access, you know, just by either dialing it in here or using a controller. That's literally 3 seconds of knob twisting to turn like a reedy, not even reedy, like a recorder into like demon speak from Modular Hell, you know? So just to like show how quick and how flexible every sound is. What's kind of interesting, because the problem that you guys were asked to solve that ended up turning into like an entire fractal universe of new instruments, which is amazing. To me, it was never a problem because inside of each preset, it's so flexible.
Josh, I would just add, in our latest firmware, yesterday when I was showing the ratio synth, and FM is kind of like has that clinical sound sometimes, and I was using the 10H function in order to smooth it out and create that. We now have that in the master section, kind of like this pre-gain saturation. So you now have another flavor of distortion.
Oh, wow.
Where it's that same sort of thing. You play monophonically, it's not there, but as soon as you lay in some chords, it starts to kick in more.
What's really useful for production, especially, like you know this as much as anyone, because especially in TV and movies, like they're gonna bury your stuff under dialogue. So if you want it to punch out, but this is the same thing. Like if you essentially like the more compression you use in your mix, the less chance it's gonna have of like actually making sense in the final mix. So instead of compression, I use saturation because it's just a much more useful tool. So I'll take like a pretty chord. I'll just, instead of making it distorted, I just subtly add harmonics to that. And now I know I don't have to compress it. It's going to sit in the mix really nicely. To have a second layer of that is amazing. And we do like, when you mix strings, like if you want like in the box sounding Hollywood strings, multi-band saturation is like your best friend because it brings out all the beautiful harmonics. Anyway, so I'm going to go back to the really distorted version. I'm going to set the pressure glide interval now to just under an octave, to a major seventh. So now I know that I can engage it. Let's give it a little splash. With an octave, but anything less than an octave. You can do these really long, glorious glides. So, you know, it's musical in a different way, you know what I'm saying? And of course you can set it, because this is an Egan Matrix instrument, to the full keyboard, which is actually 96 steps. I'm not gonna kill you guys by going up to the top octave, but I'll go one less. Oh, and then the other thing that you have to know about this instrument that I'm pretty sure is also true of the other ones in this family, the octave switcher is brilliant. So whatever you're holding stays, and then the octave changes on the rest of the instrument. And that goes for sustain and sostenuto as well. Real quick, while we're on this sound, it's a good example for discussing sensitivity settings when it comes to vibrato and pitch bend. So organic and beautiful. That's set to 2/3 of a semitone, which is like a really weird interval if you think about it. But in my experience, if I want this beautiful, elegant vibrato that took me, I'd say, 3 weeks to figure out how to do for the first time, and I wanted to sit next to a real instrument, this is the one I use, 2/3 of a semitone. However, if you don't have that level of control, you can set it down to a quarter step, a half a semitone, and you get a little more freedom with your wiggliness. Or a quarter of a semitone, an eighth step, and then now you basically, it's impossible to make it sound bad. Wiggle as much as you want, it's going to sound like a beautiful vibrato. And remember, it's independent per key, so you get these individual vibratos. And yes,
When you talk about the range of the vibrato, is that all together or each way?
it's 2/3 that way and 2/3 that way. So I'll show you. If I set it to 2 steps, it works kind of like your traditional. Does that make sense? And then it's, again, independent per key. So look, I can set it to fifths and send it in 2 different directions. Independent per key. And then, of course, you can set it to 96 steps. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. And independent per key. I'll turn pressure glide off so you can really go. But again, it's the same. So pressure sensitivity, aftertouch, pitch bend sensitivity, this is not a set it and forget it. This is use case specific. These are sources of modulation. It's a brand new way of thinking about performance and synthesis that is familiar to some people in this room, but it's completely alien to the rest of the world. And it's when you start to combine these things and these ideas, like messing with the macros and then adding like really complex, distortion to it, and then messing with the pitch bend functions coupled with an MPE arpeggiator, and you can do these bizarre things, or just using the incredible flexibility of it, that literally anything can be assigned to anything, which is just not news to somebody who knew the eigenmatrix. So like, I got this in April of last year, so I guess it's been about a year, but because of my continuumity experience with the eigenmatrix, I just knew right away. I was just like, I'm hooking up all the pedals, and I'm just going to start just seeing what these things can do. Which brings us to the next thing that should also be familiar to most people in this room, but it kind of has a unique use case in here. So is everyone in here familiar with just the special handling of sustain in the eigenmatrix? Just a regular sustain pedal. I know you are. So the first thing that you need to know, and I'm going to be a reverb snob. I think I have one that I like. Oh, maybe not. Oh, there we go, Osmose string, okay. Strings, to make strings believable, it just takes so many of very particular reverbs. But anyway, love this sound. So normal sustain functionality, this is the end of the story, right? It's an on-off switch. So the first big difference with eigenmatrix instruments is that we have 0 to 127 dynamic control over the notes being sustained. And what's also really fascinating about the eigenmatrix, and Ed actually taught me a new trick recently with this. It doesn't have to be 0 to 127. It could be set from like 5 to 12. It could be set from 54 down to 3. It can be negative and do all these bizarre things. But what you're hearing is not actually sustain. It's a sostenuto. So not only do I have dynamic control of what my left foot is playing right now, the keyboard is free. But remarkably, the eigenmatrix has 2 sostenutos. See if I can get a position where I can do this. So I'm going to pull in a second chord with the second pedal now. Remember I talked about creating dynamics in a soundscape. This is gorgeous, and it's just my feet. And my hands are still free. And
String stuff.
I'm just a new people playing Osmose strings. It was eye-watering painful.
there's a lot of things that make it work.
I'm impressed.
It's part of it's the reverb, and part of it's the touch. Like,
Well, it's also the sostenuto is great.
it's gorgeous. And it also, you have to think about, like, what is the sound doing already? There's a vibrato in it. You don't vibrato a vibrato, you know what I mean? It's a hat on a hat, like it doesn't make sense. But also, it's how you play, like these sounds. Like, what can this keyboard do that you can't do with a keyboard? Don't play it like a keyboard, you know what I mean? But that being said, everything takes a MIDI CC. And this is the thing that works best in this entire instrument class is sending MIDI CCs to this thing through DIN, through USB works like a charm. There's no kinks to work. Like it's so basic, everything can do. I can do it with a controller, but I could also map sostenutos to my DAW and automate them so I could coordinate like a really extensive performance. It actually taught me that you can also, when you can pass a sustain into a sostenuto and you can keep stacking these things using the pedals. Another thing that's just really cute.
Well, that lets you build up a sustain that's bigger than your hands. And then once you're happy with it, you change from sustain, just bring your sostenuto down, it grabs it. And now it's in sostenuto land.
Right, and then you could go into the sostenuto settings for that, or the pedal settings, and set it from 1 to your highest number and make it disappear and bring it back when you want. Rob taught me that. So for a performance, you could have a secret chord that comes in when your foot wants it to. Or 2 secret chords. And another cute trick.
Or if you're doing a drone, but you wanted to change key, you could set one for each.
Exactly.
I was going to say what we need is a transpose.
Oh, by the way,
Switch
from sustain to sostenuto.
Yes.
in the synth, you can set it for each preset. Where you can set what each pedal does.
But you're not changing that live. I felt like you just said you were. You could have it in sustain.
Oh no! So if you have the first pedal set to sustain, and then you pull up the sostenuto to max, it's going to grab what's on the sustain, which I had no idea. Another neat trick, again, MIDI CCs. That's sostenuto 1, sostenuto 2. So now I'm just doing them here. Or I could have it automated to do, like, the sky's the limit. It's just about getting creative. And before I tax your patience too much, I'm gonna just jump to getting creative. So I'll give you guys some use cases and ways that I like to think about it. So every single technique, did I leave anything out? Is there anything like crucial to the sound engine or the techniques that I left out? I think I got most of it.
There's one technique that I like, and you can do a chromatic design on the black. If you play black,
Yeah.
it's chromatic.
Yeah.
Josh, can you do that with
It is chromatic.
I don't like it. I don't like the way it feels, but it is cool.
It's gonna wheel. It's
You
gonna
have to
wheel.
build up a callus.
Yeah.
Put that sensitivity up to the max. Like
It is. So anyway, here's, I did a demo at Chuck Levin's in DC, which is like a really cool music store, like kind of nationally renowned. They're really cool guys there. No, this was in B&H in New York. And someone asked me a question. It wasn't about this, but they gave me this bizarre idea. I was like, can we turn a drum sound, a percussion sound on here into like a timpani from outer space? So I took this drum sound. It's called Octalive drum. I put it through the MPE arpeggiator. And another thing you got to keep in mind, I didn't say this, by the way. Everything can be tempo synced to your DAW, to a MIDI clock, and it actually works quite well using the 5-pin DIN or the USB. So the use case for this crazy monstrosity I'm about to show you would be, I have like an orchestral score with a chase scene, and I want to put some really interesting, bizarre layers with rhythms. So all these different ratchetings of rhythm, they are set to a tempo. They are rhythmic, so it would actually sync to something that I have clocked in the DAW. But yeah,
Could you tap in like tempo signals, like whatever you were tapping, so you can change the arpeggiation as you were playing?
I could set a pedal to move the tempo. I believe you guys might know the answer. I'm pretty sure there's a MIDI CC for that setting. I'm not 100% sure, but if I was using my DAW or a MIDI clock, I could easily set a pedal to do that, just using the MIDI CC. That would probably be the easiest way.
I just mean like in performance. So
Yeah, for sure.
The arc would follow you, would follow your inconsistency of tempo.
So yeah, like anything that can send a MIDI clock. So if you had like one of those loop pedals that can send out a MIDI clock or to do a tempo sync, and tap that, and that coordinating your set, send that in the MIDI DIN, and that's gonna, as long as you have the settings right on this, it's gonna follow that. But right now, what I have to,
Well, I would anticipate there is a MIDI CC for the internal tempo.
it makes sense, and there's multiple internal tempos.
No, not yet, sorry.
Okay.
I'm gonna correct it.
There's multiple tempos too,
Definitely the expressive.
because there's tempos for the recirculator, there's tempos for the arpeggiator, and even within the arpeggiator, there's a couple different tempos you can set. But anyway, right now I have this pedal mapped to pitch. Also, let's give it some of that nasty pre-gain distortion. I would never play that in my entire life. It's cool and it's fun, and you change the presets or mess with like arpeggiating drums is so fun on this. And it's one thing I was talking about Lippo with like and a few other people yesterday, like you get rewarded for not being a pianist on this. Like you get rewarded for playing weird. When Guillaume was doing the music for Dune 2, he was actually able to kind of like outperform a lot of the keyboard players there on the synth, from what I heard. Because he's not a keyboardist, so he had like a weirder technique that like you get rewarded for just being creative or like playing. Like here, I'll give you another example. This is actually, you know what? Before I do that, I'll give you guys a more fun kind of musical example. I think it's this one. Okay, so I'm gonna crank the reverb on this. I hated this sound when I first found it. I fucking hated it. I was just like, the worst sounding guitar I ever touched in my life. I'd never use it. And then I started twisting knobs and I learned how to play it. And I realized it was me. The problem was always me. You can dial in like the most believable acoustic sounding things based on your playing technique. So right now I have pressure glide set to 2 semitones. So I know I can't do that. And then I have to be sensitive about how I play it, but like. I love this sound as it is because you can do like gypsy guitar, you know, like. But you have to think like a guitarist, but not a guitarist, because a guitarist would never be able to make a sustain get louder and quieter, you know. Or like. You get the idea. Now, here's what's crazy. I'm just going to crank the pre. Same exact sound. I'm trying to kill you guys. All I did was crank the pre. And then if I start to mess with some of the other colors in there, like just the creativity of like how you play it, how you program it, and they kind of meet in the middle. You know, like you start exploring what my hands can do, then you start exploring what the sound can do, and then you discover more of what your hands can do and more of what the sound can do, and it's this never-ending like. Which patch is that? It's called a Koos-Cop.
Is that one of Christoph's?
No, but I'll show you one of. Well, actually, is it? Is that yours? I'm going to show you one of Christoph's that he made for New Year's, and I'll show you another use case that I love because it's actually the opposite of what I've been doing. And then I'll show you like one or two more, and we can call it a day.
Just to what Josh is doing when he cranks the pre, he's also bringing down the post.
Oh yeah, great disclaimer. You will kill yourself and your speakers.
It's just like you put on a guitar amp, where you have the two gains and you have to combine them.
Okay, so this is a Christoph sound. It's called Bouncing Pad. The OS is just Osmose because you made a ContinuuCon version. So this is a pad that is continuously evolving in a really brilliant way. So just by itself, if you hold a note down and even just to hold a sustain pedal, it's going to change in beautiful and musical ways. Then I applied the arpeggiator in converge mode, which is just, the idea of this was actually like if a touring keyboardist wanted to do something beautiful and intricate that you could never play with 12 hands on a piano, but make it glorious with just one hand and free up your right hand to do something else. Oh, you know what? Let me switch back to that other reverb. Apologies. I would never program that. I would never play that. Like, it's just so, and if you're not a keyboard player, like, you know, like just how creative can you get? Think of these things all as modulation sources, not like features. Does that make sense? I'll do quickly do two more. This one I really like. I think this is the one, or is it later? Yeah, this is the one. So I had the NPR arpeggiator turned up really fast, and it just makes this like. Oh wait, no, sorry, that's later. This one, yeah, same sound, but. Or like you can find these sweet spots where the NPR arpeggiator and the distortion break up the sound to make these rhythms. You just like you find these beautiful sweet spots between things. I'll show you one last thing, and this is I was thinking about how can I create the broadest soundscape with one patch. So you've heard this sound before. Oh. It's like a very CS80 one with the aftertouch. Right now, essentially this is opening up a filter. It's called feedback on this patch, but I think it's feeding back the system, which opens up a filter. So with the smart octave switcher, I'm going to grab an octave down here and grab that with my sostenuto here. So now I have dynamic control with my left foot, filter control with my right. Now I'm going to jump up an octave. Everything else stays the same. I'm just going to play one gesture, one articulation. It's already glorious because I have control of my feet and my hands. But it's not that creative because I'm just playing one gesture. I got two hands. So I'm going to jump up another octave. I'm also using the recirculator here with the swept echo. So with my left hand, I'm going to play, let's say, like a medium to short attack. got two hands. So I encourage everyone just to be as creative as possible, to like, you know, that would be so much programming and so much like boring shit in a normal circumstance. Like, I would get to the fun stuff, you know what I mean? But I have one sound, and I would do this cool thing, and I'd map it out and figure out where it's gonna line up, and then have another sound, and then another sound, you know, like, you can pull so much relative dynamics where you have a soft thing and a loud thing, a small thing and a big thing, a deep thing and a high thing. You know, just as creative as you want to be with it.
What's the pedal on the left there? It's a Yamaha
Oh, the pedals is an FC3A and an FC7.
FC3A.
And any pedal that sends 0 to 127 is going to do a good job. And this actually has a really good pedal learn feature. It's just in the settings. It's like you hit learn, it'll ask you what kind of pedal it is. It'll say push it all the way, press, let go, press, and then you test it, and it'll show you the numbers, and you're done. Sorry to interrupt your lunch.